between a bullet and any one of the leadership. As Corps Week started, my assignment would be guarding the door to the backstage. I would be checking passes and delivering messages to those who were in the backstage area. We were instructed to tell no one who was or was not there. We were told to keep an eye on the top of the Outreach Service Center for possible snipers, and in the woods for flashes of light that might be from the reflection of the sun from a telescope of a sniper's rifle. Occasionally I would see Bill go in and out of the area. Sometimes people would try to press us to see someone, but for the most part things were quiet. Sometimes someone from leadership would stop and talk with us briefly, but most came and went without a word. It was better they did not say much because we were usually preoccupied with what was going on around us. They seemed to understand this. During the Rock, it was quite busy. The Rock of Ages had grown to well over 20,000 people in attendance each year. People were naturally friendly, but we had to learn how to be distant but polite. The backstage area was quite quiet except for a couple of incidents. Two men came up to me one day and started to speak with me. They did not look like the typical way believer. They asked if they could speak with Vince Finnegan, who was at that time the worldwide outreach coordinator. I told them they did not have the proper passes. The older man told me he understood, and the young man gave me a long package to give to him. They unrolled the cloth, and inside was a Bowie knife with a 15-inch blade. They told me to deliver this to Finnegan, and he would understand the meaning. I quickly covered the knife and called someone over to take my position. I went backstage to see if I could locate Finnegan, and after finding him in one of the offices, I delivered the message and the knife. He unrolled the knife and said thank you, as he stated that he knew what this meant, and then dismissed me. I left the backstage concerned. Why would anyone want to bring such a weapon to a place like the Rock? And what were those men doing here? I realized there was a lot more going on than I ever realized. I redoubled my efforts to be alert to what was going on around me. The other incident happened when Werewolf had been driven up to the backstage in a golf cart. As the cart stopped, an older man ran up to him. He seemed to have come out of nowhere. He wanted to talk with Werewolf. The four of us guarding the backstage at the time were ready to pounce on him if he made a wrong move. He gave Werewolf an audio tape he wanted him to hear. Werewolf was polite and thanked the man as he handed the tape to one of his bodyguards. Werewolf then made his way to the backstage with his bodyguards, who gave us stern looks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we prepared ourselves for the last evening of the Rock of Ages. All the security was on duty, and our responsibility was surrounding Werewolf in a circle and keeping the people back as he got into his limousine. The last night of the Rock was the busiest. Werewolf and all the major leadership would be on stage. After the evening was over, there would be fireworks. When Werewolf left, it would be the most dangerous time because of the crowds of the people surrounding the backstage, as well as the fireworks, which would cover gunshots if they were to occur. The tension was multiplied by the incident that happened earlier in the week. We knew it would be even more difficult to keep an eye on everything, with the fireworks going off. Finally, the moment arrived, and we took our positions, where we wasted little time getting from the door to the car. Then we were done. My job was finally over. The next day I reported again to the finishing department. Rose had arrived at the headquarters just before Corps Week had started. We had gotten our housing assignment, which was in a double-wide trailer with 9 other people. We had a room of our own, and that was about it. We would be sharing a trailer with full-time staff members, other interim corps, and an in-residence 12th corps in their final year. We were now in our third year and considered interim corps. This year was to be used to put into practice what we had learned in our resident year. We were called to a meeting with our corps leader for headquarters. Michael Fort went over with us what was expected of us during our time there. He also assigned to us chores called household responsibilities. Duties needed to be performed on a weekly basis, but were not assigned to any full-time staff. We would be in charge of doing these with the assistance of the in-residence way corps. When I got my assignment, I found it would be the assistant in charge of the parking and transportation. Matt would be in charge, was also an interim corps. He would be in charge of the parking for Sunday services, special events, and the transportation needs to different areas, including airport shuttles. We were given a crew from the in-residence corps to make sure all areas of need were covered. Matt and I were personally responsible for parking for the Board of Trustees and their wives. A protocol list given to us explained who would be able to park where. We were to make sure the protocol was followed. We were also to open the doors for the leadership and escort their wives to the door if they were alone. At the door, duties would be taken over by the head usher. After the service was done, we would escort them out as needed. In the fall and winter of 1983, the ministry was involved in a special project. In the Art Center in New Bremen, Ohio, the Way was filming 13 one-half-hour shows called High Country Caravan for television. The filming was taking place on Friday and Saturday nights. Matt and I would have to go to New Bremen to take care of the parking. We would need to maintain the same protocol that we did for Sunday night services. The way the building was situated, the only close parking was on the street outside of the center. We were required to keep the parking on the street open for the top leadership. Once parked, we would take their keys so that when the filming was over, we would start their cars so they could be warm when the leadership was ready to go. For the next 13 weeks, we were to do this, besides our regular jobs. It was expected of us, and we expected it of ourselves. I felt privileged to be on staff and felt the more responsibility I had, the more spiritual I was. During this time, shortly after the rock, the town of New Knoxville sponsored a 10K run. Of course, they call it a fun run, and I don't know from forever what was fun about it. Leadership suggested the staff take part in the event to show community involvement and cooperation. And when leadership suggested something, you were to take it as a command. They told us that. On the day of the run, I found someone to run with. When the gun was fired, we were off. I had not been running for almost a month and a half. I could not believe how winded I was until we went by the halfway mark. I looked at my watch. We had been running under 6-minute miles. In order to catch our breath, we backed off the speed a bit. Even so, I would still pay the price for the pace we were keeping for the next 3 days. Jack, who worked with me in the finishing department, had pushed too hard and blacked out. He had to be rushed to emergency and then was released. He really condemned himself because if he had believed, this would not have happened. Besides Jack and me, Tom was the other interim corps working in the finishing department. We all worked well together. However, Tom was temperamental, and there was always some drama going on in his life. Kurt had his hands full with him. Jack's jobs were the cutting machine and the labeling machine. Tom's responsibilities were the envelope stuffing machine, hole punch, and the letter folding machine. We could fill in for each other except for the cutting and labeling machine. Work was usually went smoothly. We would work from 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening. One day a week we would work until 9. We would have a break at noon for lunch. We did not work our regular jobs on the weekend unless there was a rush job. Our weekends were usually filled with other activities. Wednesday night were corps night, and all the way corps that had not graduated were required to attend. It seemed there was always something to do. I cannot remember ever having a full weekend off. One of the reasons Rose and I were at the headquarters was to further counseling about our marriage. I went first to Tim, but he was of little help. I then went to Emma Jean Allen, the wife of the Secretary-Treasurer of the Board of Trustees, Howard Allen. Mrs. Allen was not much more help than Tim was. When Rose and I would get together with her, Rose would be quiet and sullen. I tried to discuss suggestions that had been made, but Rose would be indifferent. In the past, Rose would threaten divorce if she was not happy, and she was doing the same now. She would do little, however, in offering solutions or effort to make things better. Emma Jean saw that she was not getting anywhere, so she suggested we go see Everett Keitel. Everett and his wife were responsible for teaching the way a course on Christian family and sex. In meeting with him, Rose very clearly showed her ambivalence toward any effort on her part to make the marriage work. He told us bluntly, looking straight at Rose, if both parties were not willing to expend the effort to make things work, the marriage would fail. She made no comment on his statement. I thanked him for his input and we left. During my time at headquarters, I tried everything I could think of to make the marriage work. Fort was also involved in trying to help find what was needed, but he was at a loss as well. I tried to take my mind off these issues by immersing myself in all the activities that were required of us. Being good at my duties seemed the only way to keep myself out of complete depression. There was not much else to do. After work, there was always seemed to be some type of activity which I was required to take part. Winter melted into spring. In March, the Corps leader, Fort, came up with the idea of doing some sort of production with the interim and 12th Corps. We settled on a game show that was takeoff from Let's Make a Deal. We called it Such a Deal, and I was responsible for doing the commercials for the show. The show would be filmed for the future. I lost myself in writing and casting for the commercials. Once finished with this, we started rehearsing. The show was set for the last week of April. 3 days before the show, we got a call from Jane. We knew Rose's father was not doing very well, but the call to tell us of his death was still a shock. He had died the night before. We received permission to leave and hurriedly arranged our departure, borrowing someone's car to make the trip. We were told we had to be back Saturday in time for the show. With heavy hearts, we left for Illinois. The drive took us about 6 hours. We made it to the house and met Jane. She was holding up rather well. They had moved back into the area from Florida because she had family there. And Rose's father knew that surviving this type of cancer was slim. He wanted Jane to be around her family for support. Rose's sister Lily was taking a Federal Express flight from California to town. Her other sister Megan would not be coming. She was an actress in Washington, D.C. area and had little to do with her father and the rest of the family. Lily finally made it to the house, and Rose and Jane went to make the arrangements for calling hours and the funeral. While I was with Lily, I caught her up on our activities since we had last seen each other. Lily started to quiz me on the way was about, and I continued to try to teach her the word. When Rose got back, she asked Lily to come back and spend some time at headquarters. We both tried to persuade her to spend some time with us, but she refused. The next day, Thursday evening, would be calling hours. Rose's aunt had come from D.C. and was staying in a hotel. We met with her in the afternoon. Before calling hours were held, Rose told Lily it would be an open casket. Lily was very disturbed by this. but we managed to calm her down.